This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
Just when you thought it would be the end of the camera shootouts, I decided to do another one today with the S5, the A7 IV. Anything that we can shoot, we're gonna try out again today.
Yeah, that's right. So this is the video that you asked for, the Panasonic S5 versus the Sony A7 IV from an image quality standpoint. Now the Panasonic S5 has a lot going for it because it's only a $1,500 camera, and I think that's why a lot of you are intrigued by it right now. So the most obvious thing that we need to get right out of the way is that the S5 is not going to have usable autofocus compared to the A7 IV. So that's not at all what we're talking about in today's video. If that's something you're looking for, if you're looking for autofocus, don't even watch this video because the reality is the A7 IV is the one for you. Unless, I mean, I guess you can stick around if you just want to see the image quality coming out of the A7 IV. I've already made a video over the A7 IV, but if you want to see much more extensive footage, that will be in this video. So I'm going to do something a little bit different in this video. Rather than just sitting here the whole time and talking about the cameras and showing random tests that I've done, what I did in this video instead was I set up a little scene with my friend Matt Miller again. Thanks again, Matt Miller of 1984 Studios, for helping me out on this video. And I basically took the cameras, put them in the exact same position with the exact same lens on them, basically the same settings, and I shot the same kind of sequence of events with Matt. And I think what you really want to see is the image quality coming out of the cameras. You want to see some extensive footage from these cameras so you can kind of decide for yourself which one looks more pleasing to you, which one fits your aesthetic. The reality is, I've said it before, all cameras are good right now. It really kind of comes down to preference at this point. So I will have some more thoughts on the cameras at the end of the video because there are some things that do make these cameras quite a bit different, and we'll talk about those at the end. But for right now, sit back and relax and watch this footage and just kind of take in what these cameras can produce. Now, both of these cameras were shooting in the 4K 422 10-bit codecs, and I use my Mikey cinema lenses for all these tests. take a quick break to talk about today's sponsor, which is Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to present your work online. If you're anything like me, you're going to need to put your work online, and Squarespace makes it super easy to build a website from scratch, or you can use one of their pre-existing templates to get going. You can design whatever you want on the back end. You can embed videos and photos and move them around and customize it basically however you want. They even have an app that you can use to adjust your website or monitor your store if you have a store on there. So if you're looking to create a website right now, just do that with Squarespace. Click the link in the description to get 10% off, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Okay, so now that you've watched the footage, let's talk about a couple things about these cameras. First thing I want to address is the jello that's coming out of the Sony a7 IV. My last video over the Sony a7 IV, I did not address the jello issue because here's the deal. Normally my style of filming and how I film, I'm usually in controlled environments. I'm on a tripod, I'm on a gimbal, I'm handheld. I'm in an environment where I'm not really doing big whip pans, so I don't really look at jello that often. But something I did notice while I was filming this was that, I use an 85mm lens for one. So I almost never use an 85mm lens, but I was kind of playing around with focal lengths on this. And with that 85, once you start to kind of shake the camera at all, you are gonna see a lot of jello on the Sony a7 IV. But the Panasonic's S5 jello wasn't that much better. It definitely was better, and I think the reason that it seemed more controlled was that because the IBIS on the S5 is kind of second to none. It is kind of the gold standard now for IBIS in a camera, in my opinion. I haven't used a ton of cameras with IBIS because it's not really a thing that I have in my cinema cameras usually, but the IBIS is so good on the S5 that it kind of combats some of those motions that would cause jello. But on the a7 IV, the IBIS is not quite as good, and so the jello was there. Now, something to note though, if you put both these cameras into Super 35 mode, that dramatically helps the jello, the rolling shutter issues. Honestly, on the a7 IV, the rolling shutter kind of almost goes away completely if you're shooting in Super 35. And that's the thing that I really do like about the Sony a7 IV. I know it sounds silly, like why would I compromise to go to Super 35 over using full frame, but it's kind of fun. You can use this camera as a Super 35mm camera, and you're still getting all those amazing specs. You're getting the nice detail from the 7K oversampling coming from the camera. You don't really have rolling shutter issues anymore. So if rolling shutter is an issue for you, definitely look at the FX3 over the a7 IV, because in full frame, you're going to have some rolling shutter issues. And the other major difference here is obviously the menu system on the S5. Now, the a7 IV has plenty of video functionality built into the camera. It has lots of things you can do with the menu system. It has the grids, it has peaking, it has these things. But the S5 just takes it so much further. The menu system is just deep. It has anamorphic modes, it has pixel to pixel pan and scan options where you can kind of crop in and do camera moves within the camera. You don't even have to do them in post. It has shutter angle. It has a lot of functionality that the a7 IV doesn't have. So if you're looking for a very video focused camera, you're probably gonna wanna look at the S5 over the a7 IV. Now where the a7 IV does shine for me is just the image. It just looks really nice. I like the colors coming out of it. I like that they're a little bit more neutral, a little bit more organic, I could say. But once again, you can really change the colors of any of these cameras and make them look however you want. With the a7 IV just kind of does a little bit more for me right out of the gate. They both have dual native ISO. I believe that it's basically 3200 on both cameras when you switch to the next switch, which is nice. If you're looking at Sony cameras, the FX3 doesn't switch until it's like, what, 12,800 or whatever. So you're actually getting very good low light performance on both these cameras because of that feature as well. Another thing I did test out a little bit with the Panasonic S5 was the B-RAW functionality. I actually had a B-RAW recorder with this kit. When I made my initial video over the S5, I talked about why it was so awesome because it was a sub $2,000 camera and you could put an Atomos Ninja on there and shoot ProRes RAW. But ProRes RAW is a little bit less appealing to me because I don't use Final Cut Pro, and you kind of only can use Final Cut Pro or Premiere for that. And I use DaVinci Resolve. I've not been using Blackmagic cameras for like 5 years now. So the B-RAW functionality seemed a lot more appealing to me. So I did try that out a little bit. It kind of turns the Panasonic S5 right into kind of like a full frame pocket camera. You're getting 5.9K raw files out of there. So that was pretty intriguing. I did try it out. I did do some like side-by-side tests with the internal codec, and I really didn't really see much of a reason to use B-RAW. Now, listen, B-RAW has its place. If you want more color depth, if you want more resolution, if you want to be able to change your white balance in post, if you want to just have that extra meat in the image, then shoot with the B-RAW. It's really not that expensive to get a B-RAW recorder, and you can record to an SD card. You can actually record to ProRes, just regular ProRes 422 if you'd rather shoot in that codec as well by using a recorder. So that is handy. I do like that the camera provides that functionality, whereas I believe the A7 IV can only do ProRes RAW and not B-RAW, which is unfortunate. But if you are in a controlled lighting scenario, I would say that the B-RAW, gives you a little bit of a leg up, but it's not as big as one might think. These 10-bit codecs in these cameras now are just really good. Even though the Panasonic S5 is shooting at 150 megabits per second versus the 240 megabits coming out of the Sony, both the cameras looked really good in Rec 709. The colors moved around just fine. We're just kind of at that place with cameras now that it just doesn't matter. Something else to know is that I couldn't find a 422 60 frames per second codec on the S5, where the A7 IV will shoot a really nice high bitrate 60 frames per second on the internal codec, and they're both going to crop in a little bit. I think they're both going to crop to Super 35 when they do shoot in 60 frames per second, so keep that in mind about both cameras. But it looks like the S5 has a little bit less color latitude when you are shooting in 60 frames per second. Now, I believe that might go away when you're shooting in B-RAW, so that's something to think about. There's some trade-offs there, so really it just comes down to, if you need good autofocus, get the A7 IV in my opinion, and if you don't need good autofocus, then the S5 is a great option, and it's just $1,000 cheaper, so it kind of it can kind of trump the A7 IV just because of cost. This is just kind of a quick video that you guys asked for, so I hope it was helpful for you. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'm Suncha Sakurai. See ya.